Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on January 14th, 2021, and is current through Star Trek Discovery Season 3. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 6 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest and co-host of Trek Live. It's Bill Mann. Bill, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. It's a pleasure to talk Star Trek news and Star Trek in general. I'm always game, and I appreciate you asking me back.
Absolutely. Well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
You know, it's a combination of things to do in the future and things I'm reflecting on, that 23 straight weeks of Star Trek that we just lived through.
Oh, my God.
Plus the 10 episodes of Picard at the early part of 2020.
Oh, my God.
You know, it's kind of just amazing to think about 33 new episodes of Star Trek in this last calendar year. That was so crappy in every other way. Now, you know, we have this break. I think that's going to be tough after so much thick and thin new Trek that we just lived through in 2020. I'm kind of looking forward to and excited to kind of take stock in 2021 and revisit the fullness of everything we just lived through in Star Trek terms. Revisit Picard Season 1 with some time away and time to assess that and look at it wholly. And the same thing with Lower Decks and Discovery Season 3. I'm looking forward to revisiting and kind of letting what we just experienced soak into the sort of tapestry of all of Star Trek. One of my favorite things about all of this is having it feel so homey and comfortable, and this thing that is like a warm blanket I can throw on all the time. And I kind of know what's coming, and I kind of feel like I know the show in and out. And I'm looking forward to allowing that new stuff to settle into the rest of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in so many ways, it was sort of just a whirlwind experience. And,
yeah,
I reflect on something like Lower Decks, where, we got 10 fabulous episodes of Lower Decks, and then we didn't even get a week off, and we jumped right into Star Trek Discovery, and then it was all 32nd Century and the burn, and when's Burnham going to meet back up with Discovery, and where is Discovery, and Federation and Starfleet and Voyager and Osira and the Emerald Chain, and Burnham's captain. And so it will be nice to kind of, as much as we obviously I would love there to be new Star Trek today. It's a Thursday we're recording. It's the first Thursday in 24 weeks that we haven't had a new episode of Star Trek, but
Indeed.
It will come again. And you're totally right. I mean, let's look on the bright side, right? This is not, we're not just going to spend the next however long it takes until we get new live action Star Trek back on TV, even if it takes a year, even if it takes 14 months. We're not going to spend that time sitting on our hands. There is plenty to enjoy. There's 800 and, what did we end the season at? 802 episodes of Star Trek. So,
I believe so.
Plenty to keep us company.
For sure.
Well, the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is I started playing Star Trek Adventures a few weeks ago, the role-playing game by Modifius Entertainment. I've been curious about it for a while. I obviously, as a big Star Trek book collector, I own all the books, but I had never had the opportunity to play it. And I put out a call on Twitter about 6 weeks ago saying, I'd be interested, thinking no one would respond, saying I'd be interested if anybody is running a game and they're looking for an enthusiastic participant who knows his Star Trek, let me know. And somebody did reach out and said, hey, we're looking for one more for a little crew we've put together. And I am having a fabulous time. We've done one session so far, one introductory session where we built our characters. I am the Chief Medical Officer, a Denobulan Chief Medical Officer by the name of Dr. Delix. And It has been a lot of fun so far. Yeah, we did our first session, and it involved Section 31 and the Zenkathy, and it just is a really fun way of immersing yourself in the Star Trek universe. And we talked about it a lot on this show when new products are announced, but I always sort of came at it from the perspective of like, the art in these books is really good, but I don't know, anything else that's going on here. But now I'm starting to get my hands around it, and I think it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I have to admit that I have never played a role-playing game at any point in any way, and this seems like a really cool way to correct that. And I'll have to definitely look more at it and maybe end that dry spell, I guess, without having taken that leap.
You do just sort of have to like just give into it and be like, I'm playing Star Trek, right? It's like being back on the playground, age 8, with that element of just sort of let it all go and just kind of, have fun with it. But if you could do that, and it does take a little while to kind of warm up to it and sort of get into the spirit of things, but if you can do that, it is a lot of fun.
Cool. You sold me. It's something that I'm going to definitely look at, and I'm sure in the next few weeks I'll be scouring Twitter to maybe see if I can find a group to hang out with and give it a try with.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Following the Star Trek Discovery Season 3 finale, That Hope Is You, Part 2, Discovery's showrunner, Michelle Paradise, has been making the interview rounds, breaking down the show's 3rd season and teasing what we might have to look forward to in Season 4, which is currently filming in Toronto. Of course, one of the biggest developments by the end of Discovery's 3rd season was the decision to elevate the show's protagonist, Michael Burnham, to the captaincy of Discovery. We knew we wanted to get Burnham to the captain's chair at the end of the season. So a big question was, if that's where we want to get her to at the end, where should she begin and how far away from that can we take her, Paradise said about Burnham's Season 3 arc. As we see over the first half of Season 1, she's even questioning whether or not she can reconcile her year living there with coming back into Discovery, and ultimately, of course, that culminates in the big question for her in Episode 7, where she turns and recommits, and that sends her on the journey to ultimately taking the chair herself. Peeking ahead to Season 4, Paradise confirmed that David Ajala's book would also be returning for the 4th season, as well as Starfleet Commander-in-Chief Admiral Charles Vance, and also teased that Tilly's arc into the acting first officer position in Season 3 will continue into next season. She also confirmed that Doug Jones's Saru is not leaving the show, despite turning over the captaincy of Discovery to Burnham. And of Season 4 as a whole, she said, I can say the places we were really focused in Season 3, trying to make sure our characters can grow, exploring new relationships, exploring how people can change, finding new layers for each of our characters are also a really strong focus for Season 4, and I expect we'll continue to see our characters grow in new and hopefully exciting ways. Well, very cryptic, but very exciting comments nonetheless. And finally, Paradise has offered some comments to help clarify a question many fans have been asking, which is how the Season 1 short trek Calypso fits into the Discovery timeline. Calypso takes place many, many years beyond where our heroes are right now, Paradise said, and at some point, we will absolutely have to match up with that so that Discovery as a whole, including Calypso, all fits together as a piece. So I guess don't expect a craft appearance in the near future on Star Trek Discovery. Bill, were you happy with Season 3 of Discovery, and what are you hoping for in Season 4?
I was very happy with Season 3 of Discovery. I thought it capitalized on the promise of stepping into a whole new frontier and wiping the slate clean, and seasons 1 and 2, and even back to Enterprise pre-Discovery, new Star Trek, even the Kelvin movies were so sort of tucked away in the timeline at very specific points where you had to kind of bracket yourself with continuity, and you had rules for things you could do and you couldn't do, and what could you stretch and what couldn't you stretch, and what you had to be hardline about. And this felt like a real breath of fresh air for me, with really going into such a deep, far point in the timeline that all was possible and everything was sort of on the table. And I think they did a nice job of putting the characters in positions to respond to that. I loved, an episode like Forget Me Not for the way that it put the characters in a position to have to reflect on their place in the universe now, and having to kind of deal with the trauma of the consequence of their decision to jump that far into the future. And I think that the reality of having to stay there was setting in. I like the way that the show took the time to kind of hit these beats and not rush to, okay, we're here and here we are and this is what we're doing now. It felt like the show took its time to allow the audience to kind of settle into the consequence of the gravity of the situation that the crew finds themselves in. So I'm very happy with where the show is. I'm thrilled with where the season ended. I think I'm certainly, mileage may vary, and there's certainly a lot of, debate about the the merit of the decision on who the captain is at the end of the season out there. I am completely in love with it. I can't wait to rewatch Star Trek Discovery as a whole, because I feel like the end of that last episode sort of culminated and really put a button on Michael Burnham's journey. And I know we're going to talk about this in the next news story too, but her journey from the Vulcan hello to now, the first time we see Michael Burnham walking through the desert with Captain Georgiou, talking about being a captain and working up to that position and what that all means. And I couldn't believe how happy I was as it was happening, as it was kind of settling into place and realizing what they were doing. I was like, okay, this really feels right. For me personally, I can only speak for myself and my own reaction to it. So that's kind of like a sprawling answer and just what immediately comes to mind with the how'd you feel that season as a whole question. But I was really pleased with it. And I was heartened by everything I read in this article with the way Michelle Paradise kind of sums it up and promises what's coming. I think I was really heartened by the way it ended in terms of it doesn't end on a major cliffhanger by any means. It really feels like a solid conclusion. It feels like a lot of things are resolved, but there are many things that are not resolved. It's not a best of both worlds or Scorpion kind of cliffhanger. There are a lot of things that are tied up and the story feels resolved, but there are a lot of character things. Obviously, Saru is that obvious. He's got a major cliffhanger in his own character arc, and there are major unresolved conflicts between Burnham and Stamets. Like there are a lot of things left hanging that are going to lead into season 4. So I found that balance really satisfying as well.
Yeah, the more I have sat with this season as a whole, and I'm actually in the middle of sort of rewatching it right now, the more I actually think I like it. And in some ways, knowing the full story actually even makes the episodes that I didn't enjoy all that much like a lot better. Like The Sanctuary, for example, not my favorite episode of the season by far, probably my least favorite episode of the season when I first watched it.
Likewise.
Still is my least favorite episode, but like now I see why that episode exists and how it fits into the overall journey of the season for all of the characters. And that is something that like season 2 didn't really give me, because season 2 started off really strong, but I thought the ending it sort of fell apart a bit at the end. And so you didn't get that sort of sense of like a triumphant ending sort of raising the caliber of the rest of the story as a whole in the way that it has for season 3. Like now you can point to each episode along the way and say, how does this episode specifically contribute towards where the season ended, and very easily be able to see that kind of dot connecting between them. And I think that's, from a storytelling perspective, that's very, very well done. And perhaps this speaks to the value of having a showrunner who starts the season and ends the season at the same time, which has been a big challenge for Discovery in its previous 2 seasons.
Couldn't agree more that really paid off a lot this season. And I think you can feel the continuity within the season. And that really paid off, I think, having that stability in the writer's room. It felt more stable. It felt more confident. I think the show feels more confident as a whole, just being in the 3rd season. I think the actors are incredibly comfortable in their roles. Last week, you and Abby talked about Wilson Cruz just being unbelievable. I could not echo that more. He is the low-key, kind of bubbling beneath the surface MVP of the season for me. I think every time he's on screen in episodes like Forget Me Not, in this finale and Die Trying, he's a warm blanket of empathy. He is like empathy embodied in a Star Trek character in a way that's unique to him. And I couldn't be happier with just the way the cast has settled, the writers have settled. I think that it feels just more stable and more firm footing. And I couldn't agree more with you also on, I can't wait to go back and watch the season as a whole with the kind of knowledge of where it ends and looking at it as a complete story. An episode like Die Trying, that once the episode kind of gets rolling and they're off on their mission to go get the TCOB and all that, and Burnham's in command, that entire subplot, the way she operates on the bridge, the way she is in command, the way she makes decisions, the way that whole thing plays out, just when they jump to the ion storm and have to deal with that resonates so much more in hindsight to me. Like that's like a little tidbit of what's to come. When Burnham is in a good place and she's confident, she has a mission to accomplish, and she's firing on all cylinders. She kicks butt in the captain's chair. She's not physically in the captain's chair. She waits to sit in that until the very end, obviously. But that there are moments in it that I can't wait to kind of go back and revisit with the knowledge of where it ends up.
Well, in addition to hearing from Discovery's showrunner, series lead Sonequa Martin Green has also been on the interview circuit discussing Burnham's growth in season 3 and becoming captain. In an interview with A Vulture, Martin Green said that Burnham eventually becoming captain had been the plan when she took the role. From the very beginning, even with our original showrunners, Aaron Harbarts and Gretchen Berg, up to our current showrunners, Alex Kurtzman and Michelle Paradise, there has always been in the ether that this was something we were heading towards, that Burnham would be on this journey of self-actualization that would also be the journey to the chair. She talks at length in the interview about Burnham's arc over the 3 seasons of Discovery, and I recommend reading the whole thing. Check out the show notes on trekcore.com. But in Martin Green's conception of it, Burnham's journey in season 3 is to learn the balance between duty and joy, as well as finally letting go of the destructive feeling of loss and responsibility caused by her life experiences. SMG revealed that she did her own preparation to authentically portray a Burnham who spent 1 year off screen between the season opener That Hope Is You Part 1 and the second episode of the season, Far From Home. I charted out that year nearly to the day, she said, 365 days of the experiences that I had as Burnham with Book as a courier, searching for answers to the mystery of the burn, deciding who I want to be and what I want. And as to how her Star Trek experience to date has shaped her own life, Martin Green had this to say: something like Star Trek, it already has impact. It was such a blessing to be able to come into something that already had an influence with prescient themes, especially right now in this politicized time on the heels of the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm thinking about all of these things, about hope, about diversity and inclusion and connection in my own life, and how as a Black woman I can champion these causes. And that's why sitting in the captain's chair at the end is just so powerful and brings tears to my eyes when I think about what it represents. Well, Bill, we've talked a little bit already about Michael Burnham's journey from season 1 through to the captain's chair at the end of season 3. What kind of things do you think you want to see for Captain Michael Burnham in season 4?
I want to see her continue to be the sprawling, everything person that character has been all along. The thing that I love so much about Discovery and that I love so much about Michael Burnham is I think in comparison to a lot of the other shows that we've loved and lived through, the protagonist of those shows is often a character who has kind of arrived, who has become the sort of, they're at the peak of their being, kind of. They've already reached that pinnacle. They're the Captain Picard, Captain Kirk. And Sisko certainly at the beginning of Emissary has to start a journey that I think gets resolved a good bit by the end of Emissary and continues to grow. All these captains continue to grow throughout their shows, but I love so much that Discovery is really about the building of that person and the trials and tribulations that go into a person getting there. And I think I always found like Tom Paris's story arc resonate a great deal with me from Voyager, because it's about redemption. It's about needing a second chance and needing people to give a second chance and trust. And Michael Burnham is that as well, and on an even greater scale now that we see her sit in that captain's chair. So I'm hoping that she continues to build toward that pinnacle person that Captain Picard is and that I grew up looking up to in that way. I want to see Michael Burnham make mistakes on occasion and overreach and jump before she thinks on occasion. Like I think there's beauty in that, reality in that, there's relatability in that. And yeah, I'm hoping they resist making her a character that has arrived, as opposed to continuing to evolve and develop and grow into this final product that maybe we see someday down the road.
I saw someone say on Twitter, and I apologize if you're listening to this and it was you and I haven't properly credited you, but they said that in Deep Space Nine, the last episode of season 3 was the episode where Sisko gets promoted to captain. And so somebody then... So, they were sort of comparing like the journey of the Black captain and the Black first officer main character, sort of culminating in the same moment at the end of season 3, in which they sort of get the captain's pips that they deserve. And someone came in and replied and they said, oh, well, does that mean that Worf is showing up in the season 4 premiere of Star Trek Discovery? And, I wouldn't be opposed to that, quite honestly.
I'm always down for one.
But I mean, in all seriousness, first of all, as I said when I was describing the story, like, this interview is really worth going and reading in full to sort of hear Sonequa's very deep understanding of her own character, and honestly her character's foibles as well, right? Like, I think one of the things that I struggle with is people online criticizing the character and how saying that she's clearly very flawed, but at the same time the show sort of holds her up as being, flawless. And like, I personally think that's a really deep misreading of the show. I think that's a misreading not just of what the writers have tried to do with this character, where they are showing you a flawed person and then continuing to poke at those flaws and explore those flaws, but also for the woman portraying that character as well, right? Like, Sonequa Martin Green does not think that Michael Burnham is and I hate using this term, but it is the term you see thrown around a lot online, a Mary Sue, right? She sees her as being a deeply complicated, layered character, riven with flaws, who oftentimes gives in to those flaws far too much. But through that kind of learning experience and the trauma and the growth associated with that has sort of gotten herself to a place where a lot of that raw talent, which is really obviously a part of this character, has managed to kind of hew it into something that is now a Starfleet captain, right? She was on the verge of a captaincy at the beginning of season 1, but clearly at that point was not ready for it. And if she had become captain when Giorgio wanted her to become captain, she probably would have been terrible at it. But like now, with all of the experiences of the Klingon War and the Red Angel Crisis, and now this first, well, for her, year and change in the 32nd century, like, she now has that kind of growth to allow her to move forward with it. And that is very exciting, right? That is the kind of television that's worth watching. It's not a character who just is the best person who ever lived. It's not just your like complete anti-hero, ridiculous, sort of person. It's an interesting, nuanced, flawed person who ultimately is trying to do the right thing. But like all of us, has their foibles that they keep running into over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't echo that more. I find it to be a really fresh and just refreshing way into the show. I think the fact that this is the character that the show has been built around, and that this is these are the eyes we're seeing this story through, and we're kind of in the head of this person who's going through all these things. It's been fascinating, and I think it's been a refreshing change of pace and makes Discovery its own thing and separates it from the sort of lineage of other shows that have come before it. These shows that I grew up with that I love so much that I think if there's a valid criticism to maybe throw their way, became a little bit archetypal, I guess is the word. You have the captain, you have the first officer, you have the engineer and the doctor, and you have this crew, and they go off on adventures and we follow them along. This feels like a fresh take and a breath of fresh air and a different approach to the whole universe. And I'm here for it. I love it.
Star Trek Discovery Season 4 is currently filming in Toronto, Canada, but expect to see a bit less of one Discovery cast member as they limit their filming time due to the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tig Notaro, who plays Jet Reno on Discovery, revealed on the FitzDog radio podcast that she only plans to head up to Toronto once this season to film Discovery, much later in their shooting schedule. It's in Toronto and I don't feel safe flying, Notaro said, so I forfeited some work there, but the other chunk of work is supposed to be in May, and so hopefully things will be in a better shape with the pandemic by then. And if not, I'll just drive out there probably. She went on to say that hopefully in May I can go back out and finish, but it was just too much for me to go 2 times to Toronto for one season as a guest star, but I love it. Discovery continues filming in Toronto despite new COVID restrictions that have been imposed in the Canadian province of Ontario. In an interview with Trek Movie, Doug Jones talked about the way in which COVID protocols had changed the usual Discovery filming experience. We are plodding along, he said. We're getting things shot and it's going beautifully. It's just going a bit slower because of COVID protocols. There are a few more hoops to jump through to get your day done. So with that slower pace, we're still getting it done and they are keeping us very safe. It's all worth it in the end. Bill, well, I know you will join me in wishing the best and safest of luck to the entire cast and crew of Star Trek Discovery as they continue plodding through filming for season 4. But on Tig specifically, Jet Reno, fan or not a fan?
I am a fan. I think I can't say that I was entirely in love from the outset, but I do think that Tig Notaro as Jet Reno brings a unique voice and a unique sensibility to the show, the rough and tumble, sarcastic voice that I don't think is really there otherwise. I think she brings a unique balance and a freshness, and I think it's certainly, I'm going to use the phrase again, your mileage may vary. I can understand the slight divisiveness because of how distinctive the voice of that character is, and the fact that she's recurring, she pops in and out. It's not somebody that we get a lot of time with, and it's not a character like Dr. McCoy, who we see every week and big part of these stories that we kind of get to know and love through going on these adventures with. It's a much more in and out, Guinan-esque sort of, in terms of appearances, getting to know her experience. But I've grown to like her a great deal. I think of Far From Home. I think she's really strong there. An Oboe for Sharon last season with the banter with Stamets. I guess that's a commonality there with those 2 episodes and her appearances in both of them. I think she's strongest in those kinds of situation. She has a really nice moment with Dr. Culber, and I think Through the Valley of Shadows, where she talks about her own backstory and losing her partner. So there are moments that are really, really strong, and I wish we got more of her. Not to obviously clearly, jump onto the story specifically. Not going to be something we're going to get, I don't think, in season 4 with a lot more Tig Notaro. But I certainly wish her well, and I hope that we get a nice little taste of her in season 4, and hopefully in season 5. We're in a much better position and we can get more.
And lastly, this week, we've received a tantalizing update on the Star Trek Voyager documentary project that was announced in early 2020, just before the pandemic hit. The Voyager documentary team, many of whom were also responsible for the fabulous What We Left Behind Deep Space Nine documentary, have announced that an official crowdfunding effort for the movie will begin on March 1st of this year. In addition to announcing the start date of their fundraiser, the producers have also launched a website, voyagerdocumentary.com, very imaginative, and a full suite of social media channels for the project. Bill, do you think you'll be giving money to the Voyager documentary?
I suspect I will. I'm very excited about this. I loved What We Left Behind. I love the other documentaries that have been delivered by David Zappone and company about Star Trek. So the track record is there. I'm excited, and I fully expect to become a donor.
Yeah, I was all in on the Deep Space Nine documentary, and Voyager is another love of mine, and I will be all in on that one too. Particularly when and if they get to a position where they are, I will give money out of the gate, but then if they plan to do any high definition remastering of footage to insert into the documentary, I will definitely give more money for that, because the high def footage in the Deep Space Nine documentary was a true highlight, and I would love for Voyager to get the same treatment as well.
Me too. And I think Voyager, obviously a great looking show, even with the standard def. So I think I would love to see how the HD treatment would benefit that show. But I think Voyager's, the story of making that show, the ups and downs of some of the things that have happened should make for some very interesting stories and some emotional revelations, I would imagine, for the folks who are, behind the scenes and in front of the camera as well. In this story, I'm really heartened to see mention that they interviewed Jerry Taylor, who seems like interviews with Jerry Taylor are kind of like a unicorn these days, very much retired and not somebody who's out there. Great to see that we're going to hear from Brandon Braga and Rick Berman. Always interesting to hear from people like that. But there's a lot of material out there from those folks, and they've been interviewed many, many times. And I'm sure they'll contribute a lot of interesting factoids here as well. But Jerry Taylor is the thing that I'm the most excited for from this article, because of how infrequently we hear from her. And she's such a distinctive voice and such an important figure in the making of this show and in the back half of The Next Generation. I can't wait to hear what she has to say about this show specifically.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how ultimately successful the crowdfunding campaign is. I've heard people say, oh, well, Voyager was never as popular as Deep Space Nine, therefore it's never going to get anywhere near the same kind of response. But I don't actually know how true that is.
Yeah, I don't either.
When Netflix posts its top 10 most watched episodes of Star Trek, and 9 of them are Star Trek Voyager, and that doesn't come out of nowhere.
No, I agree. I think Voyager's kind of enjoyed a nice little second life here in the years since. I know, Alex, I think you and I are around the same age, and the tone around Star Trek Voyager back in the late 90s and early 2000s wasn't always the most positive, which is common of all these shows, really, if you look at the contemporaneous responses to all of them. But, I think Voyager's become very well loved from a great many people. And I think there are a lot of interesting stories to tell. And I think it's a fascinating show. And I think there's a lot of good will kind of out there now with it. I think the podcast that Garrett Wang and Robert Duncan McNeil, the Delta Flyers, is really well received. People enjoy that. That's got a nice little following. That puts a lot of positive Voyager vibes out into the atmosphere. I think the cast is well loved. You have Jerry Ryan still kicking in around as 7 of 9 and Star Trek Picard. It's very much out there, and I suspect that it'll do well.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So, Bill, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
My wish for this week is I would love to get my hands on Jeff Russo's score for season 3 of Star Trek Discovery in the very near future. They've made a nice little habit, I think, of trying to think back to when the other scores have been released. And usually they're not too far off from the end of the seasons, if I remember correctly, right? So I'm really excited to hear that. I think he did some incredible work this season. Forget Me Not, for example. I think there's some incredible cues in that episode. Even Scavenger is an episode that I'm not entirely in love with. I think there are really, really good action beats in that score that I can picture myself head bobbing to in the car. Driving from place to place in this pandemic world. I'm looking forward to that, maybe bringing some light into 2021 with so little new Trek coming on TV, at least some new music to fall in love with.
Yes, my 25-hour playlist of Star Trek music needs a 26-hour desperately.
Indeed.
And I think we will not have long to wait on that. As you say, the Discovery seasons 1, 2, Picard season 1 soundtracks all from Jeff Russo. The Picard season 1 soundtrack, they released like half of it halfway through the season, and then the second half of it came out like the day after the finale. Obviously, that has not happened because we're now a week past the finale, but I don't think we will have too long to wait for it. I am convinced that it is coming and that it will be soon. And I can't wait for it either, because I think more than even season 1 and 2, and actually more than even Picard season 1, I felt that this season of Discovery had the best and most interesting and most engaging music of any of the seasons to date. And given all of the major challenges that Jeff Russo faced to kind of put that together, not being able to record with an orchestra in one room, like just absolute hats off, bravo to him for his accomplishment.
Unbelievable achievement.
Okay, so my wish is also a wish this week. It was just teased in Star Trek Discovery Season 3, and I want them to do more with it in Season 4, and that's I want to see more Cardassians in Star Trek Discovery. I say it was teased because we had Cardassian background extras. There was even a Cardassian captain at the beginning of Scavengers, but didn't get a speaking line in that scene. It's a sort of captain's briefing scene where Vance is like, hey, this is the Discovery, and he sends all like the different ships off on their different missions, but like they didn't speak. The Cardassian in That Hope Is You Part 1 didn't speak. I would love for an update on the Cardassians. So far we know more about Klingons and Romulans and Orions and Andorians and Trill even, but not more yet on the Cardassians, and I would enjoy learning more. And so that's my wish for Disco Season 4 is let's have a Cardassian episode.
I can echo that. I'm right there with you.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Bill Mann, for joining me today. Bill, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
They can find me on Twitter at TrekFan4387, and I'm on Trek Live on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It's a live stream, very loose, relaxed conversation on all things Star Trek.
And where are you right now on, what is this, the Great Rewatch 4.0?
I'm still on 3.0.
3.0.
I watch in air date, like overlapping order, like as it was experienced in real time. So I'm mixing and matching DS9 season 2, TNG season 7. Currently, I'm right at the beginning of that. Gambit Part 2, Cardassians, right around there.
Very nice. And you've got Voyager not too far in the distant future.
Indeed. Looking forward to it.
Well, you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekwar.com. Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.